local communities rarely play a role in deciding the kind of programs or interventions they want in their communities. What usually happens is that an NGO would write its proposal, and this proposal is writing it to address a preset thematic area by a funder. So the NGOs go back to the communities in the name of doing assessments, but for me, I don't think those are needs assessments in the true sense of the word. They are just what I call the fetish of participation, tokens or tokenistic behavior that is just meant to placate these communities.
Thank you very much, dear viewers, for watching this episode, one in a series of discussions focusing on Shift the Power, exploring how diverse actors, notably consultants in the civil society space in West Africa, can play a critical role or serve as the needed, indispensable change makers to advance the Shift the Power discourse and practice in the region. Today, we will be having a conversation with one of the key authors who has been contributing thought pieces around Shift the Power. In this episode, we will be focusing on his paper authored Shift the Power, Ghanaian NGOs at the Crossroads of Relinquishing Power to Local Communities. Dear viewers, you can read this paper on WACSeries website by clicking on the link in the comments section below. And to dive into the conversations for this episode, I would like us to welcome my dear colleague, Mr. Gervin Chanase, who is the author of this piece. Good afternoon, sir, and welcome to this session.
Good afternoon, Jim, and good afternoon to viewers wherever you are reaching us from the world. It's a pleasure to be here again for yet another interesting episode of this interesting conversation.
I am really excited about the opportunity to exchange with you on the very rich nuggets of wisdom that you have in this paper, Shift the Power, Ghanaian NGOs at the Crossroads of Relinquishing Power to Local Communities. And dear viewers, I strongly encourage you to read this paper, among other rich thought pieces that are published on WACSeries websites. But for our viewers, dear Gervin, can you just quickly introduce yourself to them?
Okay, so my name is Gervin. I've been in the development social impact space for the last couple of years, spanning 15 years. I've worked in various capacities as a monitoring and evaluation officer, as a civil society and advocacy coordinator, as an author, with different NGOs across the length and breadth of West Africa, and I'm currently pursuing my doctoral degree in international development. So that's what I can say about myself. And like you rightly mentioned, I have authored quite a number of pieces on the Shift the Power discourse, and also the twin concepts of localization and decolonization. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And today we will be capitalizing on your heart as an author. And just looking at this topic, Shift the Power, which seems to be a buzz phrase in the sector now, how would you simplify this concept for the understanding of an organization that is based in Sandema, in Accra, in Cape Coast, so that they can relate to it and why not take ownership?
Okay. Thank you, Jim, for that interesting question. I think that one of the ways I would relate is to use an analogy. And the closest analogy that comes to mind is that of a liberal scale. And so with liberal scale allows you to, really unpack or explain the concept of Shift the Power in a very elementary manner. So if you look at the liberal scale, so the liberal scale here represents the current development space or architecture. So on one end of the liberal scale, it's the global north, and at the other end is the global south. So an organization or a CBO in Sandema or Cape Coast is in the global south. But if you look at the scale is not balanced. Their partners or where they receive their money or their funding from, research has shown that a lot of it comes from the global north. That means their partners in the global north, in advanced countries like the US, Europe, continents like Europe and the rest. So if you look at the scale, it's not balanced. You see that their partners or their donors, they are at the top of the scale. And then these organizations in Sandemar and the rest are at the bottom. So like a seesaw. So we're saying that this, when you look at the scale in the current form in which it is, it doesn't reflect or show that this is an equal partnership or there's equity. And the whole discourse of Shift the Power is about equity, about journeying together, about fairness, and about reciprocity. So we are saying that why don't we try to balance the scale? And by balancing, how do we empower these organizations that are in Sandema and the rest to rise up to the level of the organizations that provide them with their funding? So here we are not saying that we are taking all the power from their funders. We are just saying that, is there a way that we can even out the scale such that they see each other as equal partners, they operate as equal partners, and then they celebrate their gains and losses as equal partners? So shifting power here is simply, how do we redistribute power to inure to an organization in, for example, Sandema, like you mentioned, in such a way that it feels dignified, it's more effective, it's more efficient in doing its work, and also that it's more accountable to its constituents, that, and also it's able to journey together with its partners. So this for me would be my explanation of shifting power. And so the question then would be, why do we have, is the liberal scale not balanced? Why is it that an organization or a CBO in Sandema is at the bottom and their partners in the global south, in the global north, are the top? So there are a lot of reasons for that. And for me, fundamentally, one of those reasons is the fact that when you look at the relationship that they have, that relationship is not, it's a relationship that resembles, for lack of a better word, a master and a servant. So, and the reason why this is happening is because one has money, and money, it's a form of power, or money gives an organization or an entity some form of power, right? So when you have the power and somebody or another actor, like an organization in Sandema, is in need of a critical resource so that it can go about its programming, by virtue of the fact that you have that critical resource that this organization needs, you have more say in deciding a lot of things in the relationship that you have. So we need to address this. How do we get these organizations, empower them so that they can be resilient, they can be sustainable, and also they can have a bigger say in the relationship that they want to cultivate with their funders or their partners in the North. So this would be my simple explanation of shift the power. And I used funding because I believe that funding for me is one of the most critical resources when it comes to restoring the balance between these different actors that I mentioned in the analogy. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. It is really quite rich. And in this particular paper we are discussing today, you caption it, "Shift the Power: Ghanaian NGOs at the Crossroads of Relinquishing Power to Local Communities." I am smiling because from the title, I am quick to appreciate that it seems Ghanaian NGOs are enjoying the power they currently wield, and there is some degree of reluctance, to let go of the power they enjoy. But can you tell us more about this paper that you've authored and why it is important for NGOs in Ghana to pay attention to its content?
Yes. So um, the truth is the angels are not homogeneous. So here, I was referring to some types of angels, and as I go on, I'll try to explain that. But when I follow the shift the power conversation, right? For a long time, since 2016, when the idea was first minted in Johannesburg, I realized that most of those people in this conversation or debate have been big, highly networked, urban-based, professional, NGOs that are operating in most of the capital cities and regional capitals of, most West African and African countries, and even in the other regions as well. And I've been asking myself, it looks like these conversations they are having about shift the power, how are local communities represented in these conversations? Someone may argue that, oh, these people represent them, these NGOs represent them, but I, for one, do not think that they represent them in the true sense of the word. For me, I think they are proxies, and I feel that in a way, local communities have not been able to find voice in these forums where they are being discussed. And on top of that, I feel that some of the existing practices that are being employed by local NGOs in their dealings with the communities are the same practices that we are advocating against. For example, local communities rarely play a role in deciding the kind of programs or interventions they want in their communities. What usually happens is that an NGO would write its proposal, and this proposal is writing it to address a preset thematic area by a funder. So the NGOs go back to the communities in the name of doing assessments, but for me, I don't think those are needs assessments in the true sense of the word. They are just what I call the fetish of participation, tokens or tokenistic behavior that is just meant to placate these communities. So you find a lot of programs that are out of touch with these communities, but then they still have to participate in them for the sake of participation. And so some of these things prompted me to write the paper about how Ghanaian NGOs are the crossroad of relinquishing power to local communities. And one other interesting thing is that my fear, it may not be justified, is that when eventually the power shifts, I feel that it's going to shift to a select group of NGOs that are based in urban areas, and I'm not trying to name names. And these people will become the new locus the new locus of what power. So a form of indirect governance is going to evolve, whereby I think the donors and the big actors are going to be behind the scenes, and these new gatekeepers would be the ones pulling the strings and doing the orchestration and doing the work. And so I feel that these new gatekeepers may replicate the same tendencies that we are currently campaigning against in their relationship with local communities. And so this is it's out of this frustration that I wrote this paper.
That is really quite clear, and you succinctly put it, in the introductory part of this paper. This paper argues that for any meaningful change of power to happen, there is a need for a reordering of the relationship between local NGOs and the communities. And looking at this, I am just thinking that should there be a need for a referee, to facilitate this reordering process? And here, permit me to invite our consultants in West Africa who often, serve the big NGOs in the urban areas, to, facilitate certain processes with organizations, NGOs in different communities and with communities directly. If consultants are to play a role to facilitate, what you call the reordering of the relationships between local NGOs and communities to ensure that there is a veritable shift in power, what should consultants in Ghana start thinking about, start doing to be sure that they are relevant in such a process?
I think fundamentally consultants will have to ask themselves this question: to whom do they owe their allegiance? Is it to the one paying them, or to the communities that they want to uplift? And this is a fundamental question. So if we have a lot of hungry consultants, I think you and I know naturally which side they are going to pick. And so that's why I'm always calling for consultants to find alternative ways of raising funding and doing their consultancy work. Despite this gloomy picture that I've painted, I still believe that there are quite a number of opportunities for consultants to contribute to, ensuring that if communities actually take leadership and ownership of the process. So again, here I feel that they can commission independent consultancies to really highlight the issue, and also they can also, in responding to expressions of interest and TORs, see how they can journey together or make the communities take the lead in their approaches when they are responding to these TORs. And I know a number of consultants have been highlighting approaches like participatory approach, community-led, and all these ones. So we need to also start to see what have been the successes of some of these consultancies that they have done. What are the success stories? What can other consultants learn from them? What are the lessons? And how do we build from that? And so these, I believe, are some of the things that would help us. And I think those who are advocating for shift the power, the actors, the donors, the foundations, and all the people in the global north, together with their allies and affiliates in the global south, the big organizations that are leading the front, can we give letter and meaning to the rhetorics by, for example, like WACSeries is doing decolonizing consultancy, all the prototypes that we've talked about, can there be funding for us to actually test these and see whether they are fit for purpose or whether they're even feasible? And even with practical things like the terms of references and expression of interest, can we, as a matter of fact, also include provisions for consultants to have the leeway to give voice to communities? I think if we can do these things, these are practical things, and that will inure to the benefit and upliftment of the communities that we want to serve. Because I feel that the legitimacy that NGOs used to have in the space is waning. It's waning. And you can see why, for example, in the United States, they cut off funding and very little to NGOs that were doing good work, but we do not really have a lot of support from the public. That is, for me, I don't know which word to use, but I really wish I found a word. That for me is quite disheartening, because normally you would expect that we would hear the vociferous voices of the communities saying, no, you can't do this. Bring back these NGOs that are doing a lot of work. But if the public was like, oh yes, these people for a long time, they were just dissipating money and doing nothing, that is problematic.
Thank you very, very much, Gervin. Always very rich insights on the topic related to Shift the Power. And we really appreciate not only your contribution to these thought pieces by WACSE, but also your willingness to share insights with a diverse civil society audience in West Africa and the globe at large. Dear viewers, we are indeed very pleased to have you watch this episode. And should you be interested in contributing to any of WACSE's publications, feel free to write to research@waxe.org, and we will be happy to have you author a piece for our audience or the civil society audience in West Africa. Again, this is one of different episodes focusing on Shift the Power and the important or indispensable role consultants in West Africa have to play to galvanize or ensure that Shift the Power really happens in our region. Thank you again, Gervin, for joining us on this episode, and we look forward to having a conversation with you in the very near future.
Thank you, James. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed the conversation. It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. I have been your host, ladies and gentlemen, Jim Chick from Unjong, and I work for the West Africa Civil Society Institute. Until next time, stay with us on our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, come to our website and have a huge library of resources focusing on civil society, focusing on Shift the Power, focusing on decolonization of aid, and what have you, and you will not be disappointed by the resources that you will find to advance your work. Thank you and see you in our next episode. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.